Hey there, it's Aaron Jackson coming to you today. So what I have got for you is a compilation of a three-part series that I did around blues scales for bluegrass guitar. This was a three-part series that I did, but I kind of stretched it out over a couple of months. I didn't do them back to back. And I've had several people asking me saying, Aaron, can we get all of this stuff like in one place where it's easy to find? So that's what I've got for you today. Part one is going to show you the basic major and minor blues scale patterns that you need for slamming out great bluegrass leads. Part two is going to show you how to move those patterns through a G, C, and an E chord progression. And then part three is going to show you how to mix the major and minor ideas for coming up with some killer sounding bluegrass lead ideas. Remember that these scale patterns are a great thing to learn in addition to the vocabulary and the repertoire based stuff that I teach on this channel. And by that I mean licks, phrases, tunes, note for note solos, all of that good stuff. Because learning these scale patterns will not only help you unlock the fretboard, but it'll help you see where your favorite players are getting their great ideas from. And where this is a longer lesson, I do have everything time-stamped and organized into chapters for you, so if you want to skip around, you can do that. You can get the tabs for this lesson down in the video description and in the top pinned comment. I really hope this lesson not only unlocks the fretboard for you, but gives you a bunch of ideas that you can use in your own playing. All right, enjoy. If you've been wondering what scales you need to know for bluegrass, flat pick, and lead guitar, today I'm going to show you some patterns that are going to open up the fretboard for you and get you dominating the neck like a bluegrass pro. All right, stick around. Hey there, it's Aaron Jackson coming to you today, and what I want to show you are a series of blues scale patterns that, if you'll practice them in the way that I'm going to show you, will really start to sound like bluegrass. And if you'll learn these patterns in addition to learning this vocabulary-based approach that I teach on this channel so much, and when I say vocabulary-based approach, I mean learning phrases, licks, note for note solos from the great bluegrass players. If you'll learn these scales in addition to that, you'll start to be able to see where they're pulling from, where they're pulling their ideas from. You'll start to get a much clearer picture for how the greats of this style have come up with their classic leads, and you can use these ideas in your own playing. Now, before I get started, I did want to say this. I could make this video a 2-hour masterclass easily. There's just so many different things that you can do with these scale patterns, but just for today, I just want to give you the basic G major and G minor blues scale patterns that I think a lot of bluegrass lead is kind of based around. I'll almost definitely do a part 2 and probably a part 3 around these kind of blues scales for bluegrass, but today's lesson will be the most important because we're going to learn the patterns that we're going to use over and over and over again. So down below in the video description, I'll have the tabs for these scale patterns for you, and I've also got a couple of little backing tracks that you can use to practice these scale patterns along with. So these are going to be a series of blues scale patterns that I want to show you today, and all a blues scale is, it's a pentatonic scale with an extra note. So let's take this like classic A minor pentatonic scale. I think every player has learned that pattern at some point, and all we're going to do to make that a blues scale is add one extra note right here, and then as we go up the octave, okay? So that's the only difference. Now, doing it on that one pattern is actually not that challenging. Where it does get challenging is where we expand and we learn the 5 patterns that are available to us with the pentatonic scale, because now those patterns are going to change up a little bit. Now, one thing I would recommend, if you don't already know your 5 pentatonic scale patterns and know them well and can play them in any major or minor key, I would really recommend, down in the video description, I've got a link to my Guitar Scales Fundamentals mini course, and it's a very short, very no BS, kind of straight to the brass tacks of how to learn those scale patterns, how to move them around, and how to play them in any major or minor key. So if you're unfamiliar with your pentatonic scales, I would recommend actually going through and getting those down first and then coming back to this lesson. But if if you've got those down pretty well and you want to jump into some scale patterns that are really going to work for bluegrass, this lesson is going to be perfect for you. So what I want to do is, again, we're going to do blues scale patterns, but I'm going to do a major blues scale pattern, not a minor one to start off with. We're going to do a G major blues scale pattern. And that's going to be this down here. We're going to do... Okay, one more time. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to start off with right there. Okay, so just a couple of classic bluegrass ideas that come straight out of that. The bluegrass run. Straight out of a G major blues scale. How about the little Tony Rice? Straight out of that scale pattern. Billy Strings, Dust in a Baggie. Straight out of that scale pattern right there, okay? But now here's the thing. We don't want to just be confined to those first three frets. We want to take the notes that are in that scale pattern and move them all over the guitar neck here. So what I'm going to show you now are 4 more patterns that take those same notes and get you covering the neck here, okay? So that was pattern 1 in our G major blues scale patterns. Let's do pattern 2, and that's going to go like this. Okay, let's do that again here. Okay, now if I was doing my straight pentatonic pattern right there, that would be kind of minor pentatonic pattern too. I don't want to get too deep into it right here, but we have to change it up because we have to throw in that extra note right there, so the pattern has to change up a little bit. So one more time, G major blues scale pattern 2. Okay, now one of the things I would really recommend sticking to are the left-hand fingers that I'm using on these scale patterns, and I will have these notated out on the tabs. Let me throw a little graphic up on the screen right here. What you'll see is up on the treble clef, the treble clef note that corresponds with the tab note below it will have a number next to it. So 1 is for your index finger, 2 is for your middle finger, 3 for your ring, and 4 for your pinky finger. So that's how you'll know what left-hand fingers to use on the tabs, and you can obviously also reference this video. So anyway, that's how to know what left-hand fingers that you're going to be using whenever you're looking at the tabs. So let's now go into G major blues scale pattern 3. That's going to go like this. Okay, so that was G major blues scale pattern 3. Let's do pattern 4 from our G major blues scales, and that's going to go like this. Okay, and then let's jump up and do G major blues scale pattern 5, and that will go like this. Okay, and I'm going to throw in one more here. We're really going to take that first pattern and just play it an octave up, but instead of starting from our G note, I'm going to start from our E, and this is that, you know, very familiar kind of pentatonic blues scale pattern, but I'm way up here on the neck. Okay. So there's 5 patterns there for you, but I went ahead and did kind of that first one an octave up, but starting from the E instead of the G right there. Okay, so now what I want to do here is, as quickly as possible, I want to make these scales sound like music, and where I do primarily bluegrass guitar on this channel, I want to make it sound like bluegrass music. So, like I was saying, down with the tabs, I've got a strum machine backing track that you can practice this along with. So I want to play all of those scale patterns here for you, along with that backing track. This is at about 100 beats per minute, and that'll sound like this. Okay, so I hope that's kind of starting to sound a little bit like music there. And the thing about it is, with all of these scale patterns, there's just a whole lot of different musical applications on here, you know. And especially when we come up into this 5th pattern, you know. And learning these 5 patterns is going to help us take the notes out of this kind of first bluegrass scale and cover the neck and not just get stuck down here on these first 3 frets. So that's why I love these scale patterns, and I love learning these for bluegrass. All right, so that was the G major blues scale patterns. Now I want to do the G minor blues scale patterns. So these are going to be the same scale pattern, but they're going to look and feel just a little bit different because we're going to be in a different place on the neck. So let's go ahead and start with G minor blues scale pattern 1, and that's going to be this. Okay. So let's come up here now and we'll do G minor blues scale pattern 2. Okay. So now let's come up here and do G minor blues scale pattern 3. Come up here and do G minor blues scale pattern 4. Okay, and I'm about to run out of frets right here, so I'm going to take the G minor blues scale pattern 5 down here. So I would have normally started up here, but I'm kind of running out of frets. So instead of playing it on the 13th fret, so I'm going to play it on the 1st fret down here, and we'll do. And then after that, we're back home. So now I want to play that along with a strum machine backing track, and that'll sound like this. Okay, so when you're playing those minor blues scale patterns along with that backing track, it really brings to mind a lot of like those classic Tony Rice, like minor runs like he'll do in Blackberry Blossom. And just other cool ideas like that that he played all over the place. Check out the tune Cheyenne from the Bluegrass Album Band, where he actually plays a lot of great G minor ideas. Also, the David Grisman Quintet, the tune EMD is great. Just a lot of those Tony Rice minor runs. He really pulled from a lot of those minor blues scale ideas. So that's what I want you to do with these scale patterns here. Take them as slow as you need to. You can work on your technique, you can work on your timing, and if you'll practice these along with the backing tracks that I've got for you, it'll sound like bluegrass. And if you will practice these in addition to learning that vocabulary-based stuff like the solos, like the Tony Rice solos and the Billy Strings solos and the Doc Watson solos and all of that kind of good stuff, you'll really start to see where they're pulling from, and you'll see how all of this stuff fits together, and you can use this in your own playing. So remember what I was saying at the beginning of the video here. I'll almost definitely be doing a part 2 and a part 3 for these kind of blues scales for bluegrass ideas that I've been showing you here today. But today's lesson is the most important. You want to get these scale patterns down. You want to play them cleanly. You want to play them in time. And I'd really recommend sticking to the left-hand fingerings that I was showing you today. And again, you'll see that notated out on the tabs on the treble clef right above where the tabbed notes are. So I want to thank you for hanging out today. I really do think that these scale patterns are going to be a great addition to the other bluegrass lead material that you're learning. As always, thank you for hanging out, and I will see you next time. Today I'm going to be showing you the scale patterns that your favorite bluegrass players use to come up with their amazing solos and lead lines. All right, stick around. Hey there, it is Aaron Jackson coming to you today, and I want to welcome you to a kind of part 2 on a 3-part series that I'm doing around scale patterns that bluegrass players need to know. So I'll get right to it here. The scale patterns that I really recommend that bluegrass players learn are blues scale patterns up and down the neck. So many of the great lead lines and solos that we love from our favorite players like Tony Rice and Doc Watson and Norman Blake and Billy Strings are based around these blues scales. So in part 1 of this series, which you can check out here and I will also link to down in the video description, I went through and I showed you exactly how to play the 5 blues scale patterns. I showed them to you in G major and in G minor. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that video, or if you're not familiar specifically with your blues scale patterns up and down the neck, make sure you go and watch that video and really get these patterns underneath your fingers before proceeding with this lesson. So what I'm going to be showing you today is how to take some of these blues scale patterns, and instead of just staying in the key of G, I'm going to show you how to move these through a real simple 1, 4, and 5 chord progression. And today we're just going to use G, C, and D because this is the most common chord progression that we use in traditional bluegrass music. As is always the case with my lessons, you can get the tabs for this down in the video description and in the top pinned comment. All right, so let's jump into it here. Okay, so to get started with, all I want to do is I want to take this first major blues scale pattern, which in G will be... us to do is I want us to take that and move that through C and D. Okay, so we've just played it in G. Okay, so now I want us to take the same scale pattern and let's move it up to C here. So what I want to do with this exact same pattern, this starts on our root note in G. Okay, so we need to find our root note on the 6th string, and for this next example, it's going to be C. C is going to be up here. And I'm going to switch to my pinky finger. That way my hand can cover this kind of, you might call it 5th position. But we're just going to go through that exact same scale pattern here. And then I just want us to move that up now to the 10th fret to hit our root note of D on the 10th fret of the 6th string and do that same pattern. Okay, and then let's come back down to G after that. So one more time through G, C, and D. We'll start with G. Come up to the 8th fret with our pinky finger, do it in C. Let's move that up to the 10th fret here, same pattern. And then back down to G after that. Okay, so there we have it. Pretty simple and pretty straightforward there. Just that first major blues scale pattern. We want to learn it in G, but then we want to move it through C, and we want to move it up to D as well. We want to get familiar with playing lead ideas through chord changes because we do this all the time in bluegrass, especially around, quote unquote, vocal tunes, because a big part of the bluegrass repertoire is instrumentals. But on vocal tunes especially, which most of them use pretty simple 1-4-5 chord progressions, but when you're playing those, we really do target the chord tones and target the chord changes in our lead solos very similar to the way a jazz player would do it. So that idea is a great way to get started with this. Now, we don't want to just learn those scale patterns to get familiar with them. There's a couple of other things we want to practice. We want to practice our technique. And if you haven't had the chance to, you can reference this kind of masterclass that I shared here around foundational bluegrass lead techniques. But, you just want to make sure that you're getting a good sound out of your pick here. We don't want a really harsh staccato sound. But we also don't want too kind of flimsy of a sound, like way up here in the sound hole. We don't want that either. I like my pick kind of right where the sound hole starts. That way it's got a little bit of bite to it, but it's also got a smoothness to it. Okay, so we want to be doing that, and you want to be working on your timing as well. So we want to be working on good technique, making sure we're getting a good tone out of the instrument. Watch your left hand fingers, and again, I've talked about fretting hand fundamentals on this channel here. Make sure that your left hand fingers are kind of hitting the sweet spot of the fret. They're hitting the bottom of these frets. And as you're going through and playing those, make sure you're avoiding like the balloon man fingers. You want to avoid all of that wasted motion there. So just nice, smooth, clean. Technique, making sure everything sounds nice and smooth. And you also want to be practicing your timing with this. So just real quick, I want to take this example that I just showed you, just that first blues scale pattern through G, C, and D, and I'm going to play that along with a strum machine backing track. I'm going to play this at about 100 beats per minute, and that'll sound like this. And I will include the backing track in the email that you'll get with the tabs for this. So that's a great way to get started, taking some of these scale patterns but playing them through a common chord progression that we use in traditional bluegrass here. But now I want to take it a step further here, and what I want us to do is, instead of just playing pattern 1, I want to mix up the patterns, okay? And what we're going to do is this. We're going to do... And then now we'll go to C and we'll go here. And then for D, we'll come up here. Then when we go back to G, we'll come up here. Okay, so here's what we're doing here. So we're starting off with this like G major blues scale pattern 1. Which we we've already done. But then from there, I'm going to this like C major blues scale pattern 4. Again, when I'm saying, you know, pattern 1 and pattern 4 and those kinds of things, if you're like, Aaron, I don't know what you're talking about, again, reference the first video that I did in this series. I do a deep dive and show you all of those patterns and give you the numbers for that and all that good stuff. Make sure that you watch that one. But then after that, we're going to come up here to this like D major blues scale pattern 4. And then after that, we're going to come up to our like G major blues scale pattern 3. Okay, so what we're doing here is instead of just taking that first pattern and moving that around the neck, we can kind of stay in the same general area for a little bit while mixing up these patterns here, which is really cool. And another good thing to kind of point out here, so, you know, on this first pattern, and I've talked about this many times on the channel, but I mean, so many classic bluegrass lines straight out of that, like Tony Rice, Billy Strings, Dust in a Baggie, you know, I mean, just so much great stuff out of that. But this like C major blues scale pattern 4 down here, and you can also think of that kind of based around your C major arpeggio, but I mean, how many great Tony Rice straight out of that, even I mean, just a bunch of really classic bluegrass lines right out of that. Okay, and then up here for D, again, I'm using that kind of 4th blues scale pattern for D. And I mean, you know, kind of going back to Tony Rice, but like, you know, or again, just a bunch of classic stuff, again, right out of that. Okay, learning these scale patterns, it's like mapping out the territory. It's kind of knowing what neighborhood that a lot of these ideas come from. And then this third one up here, you know, okay, you know, Tony Rice would use, you know, like ideas like that all the time, you know, and even over on the higher part of the scale pattern, a lot of ideas will come out of that as well. So showing you how these scale patterns will really help you map out the territory, map out the neighborhood where a lot of these really great and classic bluegrass lead ideas come from. So one more time, let me go through this example here. So we'll start off with G major pattern 1. C major pattern 4, D major scale pattern 4, G major blues scale pattern 3. So really cool stuff here, but again, we're mixing those patterns up there. So now, one more time here, because you always want to be practicing your technique and your timing and trying to make this stuff sound like music. So I want to play that along with a Strum Machine backing track here. Again, this is at about 100 beats per minute, and it'll sound like this. Okay, Okay, so I wanted to end with just a couple of big picture ideas here. So I've said this many times on this channel. I typically don't recommend a scales-based approach to learning bluegrass because bluegrass, it just has such a unique vocabulary about it, and it has this really rich and extensive traditional repertoire that you have to be familiar with. So I really recommend a vocabulary and a repertoire-based approach. However, learning these scale patterns are a great thing to know whenever. However, learning these scale patterns, these blues scale patterns, is a really good thing to do in addition to learning the more vocabulary-based stuff that we learn here. When I say vocabulary, I mean phrases, licks, note-for-note solos, tunes, all of that good stuff. Learning these patterns in addition to that other stuff is a great value add to your overall skill set. Again, because you're like mapping out the territory. You're seeing where, you know, Doc Watson and Norman Blake and Tony Rice and Billy Strings and Bryan Sutton, like kind of where they're pulling from when they're coming up with these ideas. So when you go through and, you know, you learn a Molly Tuttle or a Billy Strings or a David Greer solo here, when you're familiar with these scale patterns, you can kind of see where they're pulling from, and it's not just like a complete shot in the dark there. So again, make sure that you check out the first video in this series if you haven't had a chance yet. Remember, you can get the tabs and a backing track for this lesson down in the video description and in the top pinned comment. As always, I want to thank you for hanging out, and I will see you next time. Today, I'm going to be showing you the closest thing to a secret sauce for bluegrass lead guitar that I can possibly show you. So you better hang around. All right. Hey there, it's Aaron Jackson coming to you today, and I want to welcome you to the third part of a three-part series that I'm doing around blues scales for bluegrass lead guitar. You can check those other lessons out right here, and I will also link to these down in the video description. So in the first one, I showed you the basic blues scale patterns that you need to know, both the major and the minor blues scale patterns in G. In the second lesson in this series, I showed you how to take those patterns and move them through a G, C, and a D chord progression. But what I'm going to be showing you today, and what really is the closest thing to a secret sauce that I can give you for creating amazing bluegrass lead lines, is how to mix the major and minor blues scales, move them through a 1, 4, and a 5 chord progression, and come up with some amazing sounding bluegrass lead lines. And remember, the purpose of learning these scale patterns and these ideas is to complement the other bluegrass vocabulary-based stuff that you're learning. We're mapping out the territory here. So what happens is when you map out these scale patterns and then you go and pull ideas from your favorite players, whoever that is, Doc Watson, Norman Blake, Tony Rice, Billy Strings, Molly Tuttle, David Greer, Bryan Sutton, whoever it is that you enjoy listening to and learning from. Knowing these scale patterns is going to give you a good idea of where they're pulling from. And learning their ideas combined with these scale patterns is going to put you in a really great place to come up with your own killer bluegrass leads. So as is always the case, you can get the tabs for this lesson down in the video description and in the top pinned comment. All right, so here's what I want to show you today. I'm just going to show you two ideas here, and the first one is going to go like this. So for this first idea, I'm just going to be mixing our basic major and minor blues scale pattern, and I'm going to move it through G, C, and D. Okay, so we'll start in G here, and we'll do. So all I'm doing right there is we're starting off with our G major blues scale. Okay, and I am going in between kind of the first and second patterns there. And then I'm kind of going in between those two patterns. And then right here, I'm coming down our G minor blues scale pattern 1. And then we're going to come down here and end with the major. Okay, so again, major. Minor. is the idea right there. Okay, very bluegrass sounding stuff there. Now, all I want us to do is we're going to jump up to C now, and we're going to do the exact same thing. But since we're moving up on the neck, we're not going to be using the open string. So we're going to do... Okay, so let me do that again. So we're starting with C major blues scale pattern 1. Okay, kind of jumping up into C major blues scale pattern 2, and then coming down C major blues scale pattern 1, and then back to major blues scale. Okay, and again, when I'm throwing out all of these like pattern numbers, I'm saying pattern 1 and pattern 2 and pattern 3. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, reference the first video in this series. I've got it linked down in the video description. Okay, but one more time in C. So now I just want to do the same thing. We're going to come up to D, and I'm just going to come up here to the 10th fret, do the same thing. Okay, so again, D major blues scale pattern 1, pattern 2, minor blues scale pattern 1, major blues scale pattern 1. Okay, and then we'll just go back to G after that. Okay, and there we have it. That's the idea there. We're just mixing some of those major blues scale patterns with the minor blues scale patterns to give us some really authentic sounding bluegrass lead lines. So now let me play that a little up to tempo and with a backing track. Remember, with all of this stuff, you don't want to just get the melodic ideas down. You want to be practicing your technique, you want to be practicing your timing, and as best as you can, making some music out of this stuff here. So I'm going to play this along with a strum machine backing track at about 100 beats per minute, and that'll sound like this. Okay, so I love that example there because it just clearly shows you how you can mix those scale patterns and move them through a G, C, and a D chord progression. But the thing about it is, what happens with bluegrass is a lot of times we end up playing these ideas kind of in between the open string and the 5th fret. We use a bunch of open strings and come up to the 5th fret. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a couple of ideas, again, that mix these major and minor blues scale ideas, but go through G, C, and D, but kind of hang out here in between the open string and like the 4th fret. Right, so that's going to go like this. We're going to do... to C. To D. And then back to G. So this is the example that I played at the very beginning of the video here, but I like this because, again, we're not just taking one scale idea and doing the exact same thing through G, C, and D. That's a great place to start because it shows you how to start mapping out the territory. But what we're doing here is we're taking some ideas, again, G, C, and D, that are based around these ideas that mix major and minor blues scale ideas and moving them through that chord progression. So in this first one, in G, excuse me, Tony Rice sounding idea. So we're coming out of G major blues scale pattern 1. And then minor to major. Okay, very cool. And then we're going over here to C. Now this time, instead of kind of coming up here on the neck, we're going to hang out in this area and we're going to do. And this first idea, this kind of C run, this is like out of our, you know, if you want to think about it in terms of blues scales, major blues scale pattern 4. Okay. And then right here, we're sliding up to this kind of blues scale pattern 5. Okay, so kind of coming out of major blues scale pattern 4. To major blues scale pattern 5, and again that scale pattern. So, but now we're going to switch to minor, and then back down here to major. And on that minor, that's kind of like minor blues scale pattern 4, like C minor. Okay. And then back to major. Okay, so again for C major. Minor. Back to major. All right, so with D, we're going to start off down here with like major blues scale pattern 3. Up to 4. And then right here, minor. So we only hit the minor for just a little bit in that. And that's coming out of like minor blues scale pattern 2. Okay. And then, so that's what we do in D. Back to major. Okay, and then for G, we're going to come up here and do. Those ideas there, because for this series of lessons, we're thinking in terms of blues scales. That kind of comes out of like G major blues scale pattern 4. And then we slide down and we do like G minor blues scale pattern 2. So. And then back to our little G run, which is G major blues scale pattern 1. Okay, so same deal here. Let me play this a little up to tempo with the Strum Machine backing track at about 100 beats per minute. I really hope that you can see what we're doing here, and I also hope that you see how this lesson layers on the other ones that we've done. So again, when I'm throwing out all these scale patterns and I'm like major blues scale pattern 1, minor blues scale pattern 3, if you're like, Aaron, I have no idea what you're talking about, again, video description, I've got the other 2 lessons in this series linked, especially that first one. Go through, watch those, get those scale patterns down. But just real quick, I wanted to reference 4 solos that I've taught on this channel by 4 different players, and I want to show you how they use this little secret sauce here that I'm showing you. Okay, so the first one, and I know this is familiar to a lot of y'all, the end of Dust in a Baggie by Billy Strings. Okay, and so all that descending pattern is straight out of a minor blues scale. And then when we get to the ascending part, major. Okay, so great idea from Billy Strings there. Another one is like Tony Rice's 9-pound hammer from Manzanita. And especially that last phrase right there. So he starts off with a major and then slides up to minor, back to major. Another one, Kenny Smith solo, the tune is When You Go Out Walking from the Lonesome River Band. So this little section in there, he plays... okay, and what he's doing there, that goes from C to G. And so this little part right here over C, that's all major. But when it goes back into G after that, and then just hangs out on the minor. So mixing those major and minor blues scale ideas. That solo is played with a capo on the 4th fret in B, but you get the idea there. And then another one that I've also taught on this channel is a little Bryan Sutton thing where he does a... Okay, I'll play that again. Okay, and he plays this on the tune is Hallelujah, I'm Ready to Go. It's a gospel album that Ricky Skaggs did back in the day. And it's like the last phrase that he plays on that. But again, you can see... that first half is minor. There's just a couple of ideas there from 4 different players. And this really is the closest thing to a secret sauce that I can give you for this style of guitar playing. So anyway, great ideas here. Again, learning these scale patterns and these ideas are a great complement to the other vocabulary stuff that you're learning in this style of guitar playing. So as always, I want to thank you for hanging out. Remember, you can get the tabs down in the video description and in the top pinned comment. And remember, down in the video description, I've also got the other 2 lessons in this 3-part series linked. So I really do hope that this helps you not only unlock the fretboard, but it shows you what your favorite bluegrass players are pulling from when they come up with their own leads. And I hope that you can use this to come up with your own killer bluegrass lead ideas. Thanks as always for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.